10 minutes before a sold-out podcast finale, my sister slid a release across a makeup table, and the first paragraph gave her permanent rights to my private journals. The second said I had approved every episode. I had approved nothing. For 8 months, Sadie had turned the worst years of my life into entertainment. Now, she needed my signature to keep the lie alive. The purple journal sat beside her elbow. Its cloth cover was faded at the corners, and one page still carried the round stain from a glass of orange soda I had spilled when I was 16. Sadie rested her hand on it like it belonged to her. Behind the wall, an audience chanted the name of her show. She smiled and said, "Sign first. Then we can finally heal as a family." She thought I had come to forgive her on a microphone. She thought the release was a formality. What she did not know was that I had spent the previous 6 weeks learning exactly what my silence had allowed her to claim. I had also brought a recording of my own. Before that night was over, the audience would hear the difference between a family story and a stolen one. My name is Maya Carter. I am 35, and I work as an academic counselor at a community college in Richmond, Virginia. My job is mostly listening. Students come into my office certain that one failed class has ended their future. I help them separate panic from fact. I make plans. I ask what happened, what can still be changed, and what belongs to them now. I was good at doing that for other people. I was less skilled when the panic belonged to me. That mattered because the first time I heard my own journal on a podcast, I did not call a lawyer or confront my family. I sat in a grocery store parking lot with melting ice cream in the back seat and told myself there had to be another explanation. If someone in your family has ever called your private pain a shared memory, you already know how dangerous that sentence can be. Tell me where you would draw the line. Mine should have been obvious. It was written in purple cloth, in my own handwriting, and locked inside a cedar chest at my mother's house. I grew up in a narrow brick home on Alder Street in Greensboro, North Carolina. My mother, Marilyn, still lives there. The front steps lean slightly to the left. The kitchen window sticks in humid weather. In the upstairs hall, there is a pale rectangle where a family portrait hung until my father left when I was 14. My sister Sadie is 3 years younger than I am. She was the child who could turn a late bus into a funny story before she reached the dinner table. I was the child who noticed that Mom had counted the grocery money twice. Sadie performed. I recorded. That difference shaped almost everything between us. After Dad left, our house became quiet in a careful way. Mom stopped playing the radio in the mornings. Bills appeared in neat stacks beside the toaster. Sadie grew louder, as if she could fill every room by herself, while I started writing because paper did not interrupt me or ask me to be grateful. The purple journal was a gift from my 10th grade English teacher. It had thick cream pages and a ribbon marker. At first, I filled it with harmless things: a boy I liked, a chemistry test I feared, a list of cities where I imagined living. Then Mom began coming into my room after midnight because she could not sleep. She would sit on the edge of my bed and talk about Dad. She told me which bills he had left unpaid. She told me about the woman she suspected. She told me how scared she was that Sadie would fall apart. I was 15. I listened because Mom called me steady, and steady sounded like love. The journal became the only place where I admitted that I was angry, and I wrote that Mom treated me like a second adult and Sadie like a child worth protecting. I wrote that I hated knowing how much the electric bill cost, and that I sometimes stayed late at school just to avoid the sound of Mom crying in the laundry room. Those entries were not polished. They were not fair every day. Some were cruel in the private, temporary way teenagers can be cruel when they are trying to survive a feeling. I never intended anyone to read them. The point was not to preserve a perfect account. The point was to put the pressure somewhere outside my body. Sadie knew I kept a journal, but she rarely cared about anything that could not answer back. Once, When I was 17, she picked it up and asked if I had written about her. I took it from her hands so fast that the ribbon tore. She laughed and called me dramatic. I told her it was private. She said, "Then hide it better." I did. I put the journal in a cedar chest that had belonged to our grandmother. The chest had a small brass lock and sat in the back of my closet. I wore the key on a thin chain for years. When I left for college, I took the journal with me. It moved through 4 apartments and 1 broken engagement. By my late 20s, I no longer wrote in it. I had become a counselor, moved to Richmond, and built a life that did not depend on being the calmest person in every room. I still had rough days. I still answered Mom's calls more often than I wanted, but the journal felt like an old cast after a bone had healed. Then my apartment building had a pipe burst. Water came through the ceiling of my bedroom and soaked 2 bookcases, so while repairs were underway, I stored several boxes at Mom's house. The cedar chest went into her dry upstairs closet. I kept the brass key, but I made one mistake. I left a second key inside an envelope taped beneath the chest. I had forgotten it was there. Mom had not. She had helped me move the chest and asked what was inside. I said, "Old papers, nothing anybody needs." She nodded. At the time, that answer felt sufficient. In my family, privacy was something we claimed to respect until curiosity or convenience made it inconvenient. Sadie was living in Atlanta then. She had spent most of her 20s moving between media jobs. She produced local radio segments, edited wedding videos, and hosted a short-lived interview show about creative women. She was talented. She was also always one opportunity away from the recognition she believed she deserved. Her biggest problem was not skill, it was patience. Sadie loved beginnings, trailers, launch parties, and the moment when people called an idea brilliant. She hated slow work and ordinary limits. When a project stalled, she found someone else to blame, usually the platform, sometimes the audience, often our mother, who then called me to repair the damage. The system worked because I confused usefulness with belonging. When Mom called me steady, she meant I was the daughter who could absorb impact. When she called Sadie sensitive, she meant everyone else should move around her sharp edges. I understood that by 35. I had not yet learned to stop participating. The podcast began with a family group text on a Sunday afternoon when Sadie wrote that she was developing an audio series about the stories families tell to survive. She asked Mom and me to send voice notes about a hard memory and what we had learned. Mom replied with 6 heart emojis. I did not reply at all. 2 days later, Sadie called. She said the project was not about us specifically. She wanted texture, a door closing, a kitchen after an argument, the sound of a person choosing hope. Her words were polished enough to feel important and vague enough to avoid a real question. I told her I did not want my life used in a show. Sadie sighed. "Maya, every family has pain. I'm not asking for secrets." I said, "Then you do not need anything from me." She changed the subject and asked whether I was coming home for Mom's birthday. That was how Sadie handled a boundary. She stepped around it and waited. I drove to Greensboro the following month. Mom turned 62, and Sadie flew in with a portable recorder, 2 microphones, and a new confidence. She recorded the sound of Mom slicing pound cake. She asked about the house after Dad left. Mom gave careful answers about resilience, prayer, and 2 daughters who became strong women. At dinner, Sadie placed a microphone near my plate. I moved it away. She moved it back. "Room tone," she said. I pushed it toward her. "The room can sound like you and Mom." Mom laughed too quickly. Then she told me not to make a celebration uncomfortable. Before I left, I went upstairs to check the boxes I had stored. The cedar chest sat where I had placed it. The brass lock was closed. I touched the chain around my neck and felt foolish for checking. Then Mom called from downstairs, and I walked away without opening it. 3 months later, Sadie launched a trailer for a show called The House on Alder Street. She never sent it to me. a coworker did. Her name was Devon, and she managed student communications at the college. She leaned into my office on a Thursday morning and asked whether my sister had started a podcast. I looked up from a transfer plan. Why? Devon held out her phone. The trailer image showed a dark staircase and a strip of purple cloth. Under it were the words, "Every family chooses one daughter to remember and one daughter to forgive." My stomach tightened. I pressed play. A woman with a low, warm voice described a teenage girl sitting awake while her mother cried in the laundry room. Then she said a sentence I had written at 16. In our house, being dependable meant nobody checked whether I was tired. I stopped the audio. My hand was so cold that Devon took the phone back without asking. She said, "Is that yours?" I told her I did not know. It was the first lie I told about the podcast, and I told it because the truth felt too large to say in an office with cheerful posters on the wall. I called Sadie from the stairwell. She answered on the second ring, bright and breathless. I asked where she got the line. There was a small pause. Then she said, "It's a composite." I asked what that meant. She said the show blended memories from several women. I repeated the sentence. Sadie laughed softly. "Maya, you don't own being tired." I told her those were my exact words. She said I was hearing myself because the topic was close to home. Then she added, "Honestly, that means the writing works." I left work early. On the drive to Greensboro, I called Mom 4 times. She answered when I was 20 minutes from the house. I asked her to check the cedar chest. She became quiet. Then she said, "You are upset, and I don't want to say the wrong thing while you're driving." That was not an answer. I pulled into a gas station and asked again. Mom said Sadie had needed old family photographs for research. She had opened several boxes. She insisted she did not know about the journal until Sadie found it. I asked whether Sadie had taken it. Mom said she borrowed some things. My body reacted before my mind did. My jaw tightened. My chest burned. I said, "Did she take my journal?" Mom replied, "You wrote about all of us, Maya. It isn't only your history." That sentence was the first real theft. The podcast came later. I reached Mom's house before sunset. The front door was unlocked, as it had been through most of my childhood. I went upstairs without taking off my coat. The cedar chest was still closed, but the brass lock opened with my key too easily. The purple journal was gone. Inside the chest, the second key had been returned to its envelope, and the tape beneath the lid had been peeled back and pressed down again. There was no mystery left. Someone had opened the chest, taken the journal, and restored the evidence badly enough that only a person who knew the hiding place would notice. Mom stood in the doorway. She held a dish towel between both hands. I asked when Sadie took it. Mom said she did not remember the exact day. I asked how long she had known. She said, "I knew she was reading some old writing." I did not know what she planned to do with it. I held up the loose envelope. "You showed her the key." Mom looked at the floor. That was answer enough. She said Sadie had been desperate for a breakthrough. She said the journal included memories of the whole household. She said maybe something meaningful could come from a painful time. I asked if she had read it. Mom pressed the towel to her chest. "Only the parts Sadie showed me." I asked which parts. She said some passages had hurt her. The way she said it turned me from the person whose privacy had been violated into the person who had caused the injury. I wanted to shout. Instead, I asked for the journal back. Mom said Sadie had returned to Atlanta with it. I called Sadie on speaker. She did not answer. I called again. She sent a text that said she was in a production meeting and would call when things were calmer. I wrote back, "You took my private journal. Return it today. Do not use another word." The message showed as read. No answer came. Mom watched me from the doorway and asked whether I really wanted to destroy Sadie's project before I understood it. That was my first mistake. I tried to make them understand. I sat at Mom's kitchen table and explained why the journal was different from a family photograph or a shared memory. I said those pages held thoughts I had never spoken because they were written for no audience. Mom nodded as if I were describing an emotional preference. Mom began to cry. She said she had done her best after Dad left. She said I could not imagine how frightening those years had been. I said I could because she had told me every detail while I was still a child. That ended the tears. Her face changed. Sadie called after midnight. I was back in Richmond by then, sitting on my living room floor with the cedar chest open beside me. She sounded tired and reasonable. She said the trailer used one line from my journal, not the whole book, and claimed she had changed names, locations, and identifying details. I asked how many pages she had copied. She avoided the number. I asked whether she still had the journal. She said yes. I asked her to mail it the next morning. She said she could not because it was part of the production archive. The production archive is my bedroom journal, I said. Sadie exhaled. It is also the only honest record of what happened in that house. I told her honesty without consent could still be exploitation. She said consent was complicated when one person controlled the family record. I almost laughed. I had written privately because I controlled nothing. She offered a compromise. She would send me the first episode before release. I could flag anything factually wrong. I said I did not want editorial access. I wanted the journal back and my words removed. Sadie said the episode was already mixed and scheduled. Then she used the sentence that had always made me surrender. Please do not make Mom relive all of this for nothing. Not do not make me lose the work. Not I am sorry. She placed Mom between us like a fragile object and asked me to step back. I refused. Sadie grew cold. She said she had spoken to a media attorney. She claimed family memories were not private property. I said my written sentences were mine. She replied, then prove which sentences are yours without proving the journal is about us. That was the first time I understood the shape of her plan. She believed I would stay quiet to protect myself. The more personal the material became, the less likely I was to challenge her publicly. My shame was not an accidental side effect. It was part of the business model. The first episode arrived in my inbox the next morning with a password and a note. Sadie wrote, "Try to hear the love beneath it." I listened at my desk before students arrived. The episode opened with the actress describing a mother counting grocery money beside a yellow toaster. Mom's toaster had been yellow. The actress mentioned a father who left after a school choir concert. Dad had left after my winter concert. She described a younger sister singing into a wooden spoon to keep the mother laughing. Sadie had done that for months. The names were changed. The city became a small town in Tennessee, but the details were ours and my sentences held them together. Some lines were exact, others had been softened. A few had been rearranged so that I sounded older, wiser, and more forgiving than I had ever been on those pages. Worst of all, the episode made Mom the center. The private entries where I described being used as her confidant became evidence of our special bond, and the actress said the older daughter accepted the sacred work of holding her mother together. I paused the audio and stared at that sentence. There had been nothing sacred about it. I had been a teenager who knew which credit card was near its limit and why my mother was afraid to answer unknown phone numbers. Sadie had turned a burden into a gift because a gift did not require an apology. I sent Sadie a list of passages to remove. I marked every exact line I remembered. I corrected the school concert, the toaster, the laundry room, and the narrator's age, and at the top I wrote that my notes were not approval and that I still objected to the release. She replied 3 hours later, "Thank you, this is very helpful." That was all, no agreement, no promise. She treated my objection as free fact-checking. I called her, but the call went to voicemail. The episode was released on a Tuesday. Nearly every detail I had flagged remained. One line was changed. The yellow toaster became green. Sadie later pointed to that as proof she had listened. The show found an audience faster than anyone expected. A popular newsletter praised its intimate moral complexity, while listeners posted clips about oldest daughters and emotional labor. The line about being dependable spread across social media in pale purple graphics. My sentence became a slogan under Sadie's name. At first, strangers did not know it was me. That distance lasted 9 days. Then someone from my high school commented on the show's page. She asked whether Alder Street was the same Alder Street in Greensboro and tagged Sadie. Mom called to say old friends had reached out with support. She sounded moved. Women from church told her they had never understood how hard she worked to hold us together. One invited her to speak at a support group. Mom said, "Maybe this is why we went through it." Nobody called the older daughter by my name yet. I still felt exposed. My private anger had been cleaned, narrated, scored with piano music, and returned to me as character development. The part of me that had once been 15 felt trapped behind glass. Devin was the first person who said the word theft. We sat in my office after closing, and I played her the section about the laundry room. Then I showed her a photograph of the journal page. I had taken pictures years earlier when the binding began to loosen. The sentence matched word for word. "That is not shared memory," Devin said. "That is your writing." I started crying then, not loudly. I put both hands over my face and felt embarrassed by my relief, because for 2 weeks my family had argued about ownership until I could barely name what happened. Devin named it in one sentence, and the room became solid again. She asked what I wanted. The answer came quickly. I wanted the episodes removed. I wanted my journal returned. I wanted Sadie to tell the audience that I had never agreed. I did not want money. I did not want an interview. I did not want a role in the story she had built from me. Devin suggested I talk to someone who understood media rights. Her cousin, Elise, handled contracts for writers and small production companies. I resisted. Calling an attorney felt dramatic, and dramatic was the word Sadie used whenever I protected something she wanted. That hesitation cost me. While I was deciding whether my boundary deserved professional help, Sadie released the second episode. This one included a scene I had never told anyone. It was about the night I packed a duffel bag and planned to leave home. I had been 17. Mom and Sadie were asleep. I put 2 shirts, a pair of jeans, and the purple journal into a gym bag, but I made it only as far as the bus station before fear brought me home. I had written every detail, including the amount of cash in my pocket and the lie I told the clerk. The podcast actress read the scene slowly. She described the older daughter choosing family over escape. Sadie added narration about loyalty. She said some people stay because love is stronger than anger. That was not why I returned. I returned because I was 17, had less than $40, and did not know where to go. Sadie had taken my fear and rewritten it as devotion to the people who caused it. Then my phone rang. It was a student named Kiara who had graduated the previous spring. She said she loved the podcast and had recognized a phrase I often used in advising sessions. "A plan is not the same as a promise," she said. "Is the older daughter you?" I denied it. The lie came out automatically. Kiara apologized and ended the call. I sat alone in my office, looking at the framed thank you notes from students, and understood that Sadie had followed me into the one place where my history had never been my identity. That evening, I called Elise. Elise did not begin with outrage. She began with questions. Did I write the journal myself? Did Sadie have permission to possess it? Had I signed anything? Did the show use exact language, or only events that other family members could remember? I answered from my dining table with the purple graphics open on my laptop. Elise asked me to send the photographs of the pages, my text demanding the journal back, and the email that said my notes were not approval. She read quietly for several minutes. Then she explained the issue in plain language. Sadie could tell her own memories. Mom could tell hers. They could describe our home and Dad leaving. What they could not simply take was my original written expression, especially exact passages from a private journal they had no permission to use. The distinction helped. I was not trying to own the family's past. I was trying to stop them from performing my private words as if I had donated them. Elise said the photographs and messages created a clear record. The conflict already exists, she told me. She recommended a formal notice. That sentence changed me. I had spent years believing a boundary created conflict. In truth, the violation created it. A boundary only revealed who benefited from pretending otherwise. Elise sent the notice the next morning. It identified 12 exact passages in the first 2 episodes and demanded that Sadie stop using the journal, return the physical book, and correct any statement suggesting I had participated. It did not threaten a dramatic lawsuit. It gave a deadline and asked for a written response. Sadie called within an hour. I let it ring. Then Mom called. I let that ring too. A minute later, the family group text began filling with messages. Mom wrote that lawyers were unnecessary between sisters. Sadie wrote that I had chosen public destruction over private conversation. I replied once, "Return the journal and stop using my writing. That has been my request from the beginning." Sadie answered, "You gave detailed notes on the episode." I reminded her that the notes explicitly denied approval. She posted a screenshot of my corrections without the sentence at the top. The hosting company responded 2 days later. It asked Sadie to provide documentation of rights to the written material, and until the issue was reviewed, the company paused new advertising placements. It did not remove the episodes. The show remained available, and downloads kept climbing. Sadie told Mom I had frozen her income. Mom called from a number I did not recognize because I had stopped answering hers. She said Sadie had invested months of unpaid work. She asked whether I wanted my sister to lose her apartment. I said I wanted my journal back. Mom replied, "Why does the object matter so much if you have photographs?" I almost answered. Then I heard the trap. If the physical book did not matter, Sadie could keep it. If it did matter, I was sentimental and irrational. I ended the call. At work, the situation became harder to contain. 2 students mentioned the show during appointments. One asked whether my mother had truly told me about Dad's suspected affair when I was 15. She asked with concern, not cruelty. That made it worse. I told my supervisor, Henry, that a family podcast had used private writing without my consent. Henry was kind but cautious. He asked whether the college was named. I said not yet. He asked whether I expected media attention. I said I did not know. Sadie sent me a long email. She said she wanted to resolve everything face to face. She offered to meet at Mom's house without producers or attorneys. She promised the conversation would not be recorded. If I explained what I needed, she said, we could redesign the rest of the season. Elise advised me not to go alone. Devin offered to come. I declined both offers. That was my second mistake, and it came from an old reflex. I did not want a witness because that would make the meeting feel serious, and I still hoped the 3 of us could become a family before we became opposing sides. I drove to Greensboro on a Saturday morning. Mom had made chicken salad and sweet tea, the same lunch she served when she wanted difficult things to look normal. Sadie sat at the kitchen table with no microphone visible. Her phone rested face down near her plate. I asked her to put it in another room. She did. Mom placed her own phone beside it. I checked the kitchen counter and the windowsill. Sadie lifted both hands and said, "No recording, I gave you my word." For the first 20 minutes, she listened. I explained that the journal was not a raw interview, a family scrapbook, or a draft I had shared. It was where I survived being treated like an adult before I was ready. Hearing an actress perform, it made me feel watched inside my own memory. Sadie said she was sorry she had not asked sooner. I noticed the wording. Not for taking it, not for using it, for not asking sooner, as if consent was delayed paperwork. Still, I kept talking. I told her what the bus station scene meant. I said I had not chosen family over freedom. I had been scared and broke. Mom reached across the table. She said she wished I had told her. I pulled my hand away. I was 17. You were already giving me more than I could carry. Mom began defending herself, but Sadie asked her to stop. Again, I thought something real might be happening. Sadie asked whether any part of me had stayed because I loved them. I said, of course. Love was not the issue. I had loved them and still been harmed. I had loved them and wanted to leave. Both things were true. She leaned forward. Could you say that again? I asked why. She said she wanted to remember it. That was when I saw a small blue light under the fruit bowl on the counter. It came from Mom's tablet. The screen was dark, but the recording indicator blinked near the charging port. I stood so quickly that my chair struck the wall. Sadie's face changed before she even turned around. I picked up the tablet. A recording app showed 43 minutes. Sadie said it was a misunderstanding. Mom said she had forgotten the tablet was running. I opened the file details. The recording had started 4 minutes before I arrived. No misunderstanding starts on schedule. I deleted the file while they watched. Then I opened the recently deleted folder and removed it there. Sadie said I had no right to erase something from Mom's device. The hypocrisy was so complete that for a second I could not speak. Finally, I said, "You promised no recording." Sadie replied, "Because you would not speak honestly with a microphone in the room." She said the conversation proved the family still loved one another. She said listeners needed complexity, not a legal fight. I asked whether a copy had already uploaded. Sadie looked toward the tablet. That movement answered me. The app had been syncing to a shared account. I took out my phone and called Elise. I put the call on speaker. Elise told Sadie, in the same calm tone she had used with me, that any use of the recording would become part of the existing dispute. She told her to preserve the file but not publish it. I left the kitchen, and Mom followed me onto the porch. She whispered that Sadie was under enormous pressure. The show might be her last chance to build a career. I said, then she should build it from her own life. Mom said the three of us had only one life between us. I told her that was the problem. The drive home took longer because I pulled over twice. I was furious with Sadie, but I was also furious with myself. I had entered the house without a witness. I had explained my pain to people who treated explanation as content. I had mistaken a softer voice for a safer room. Elise confirmed that the recording had synced before I deleted it. Sadie's attorney sent a short reply promising it would not be used. He also claimed my conversation showed voluntary participation in development of the series. Elise called the claim weak. I called it exhausting. 3 days later, a teaser appeared on the podcast page. It contained no direct recording from the kitchen. Instead, Sadie narrated over soft music. She said the older daughter had finally admitted she stayed because love was stronger than fear. I listened twice. The sentence was not a quote, but it came from the exact questions Sadie had asked at the table. She had obeyed the narrow instruction and violated the reason for it. She did not play my voice. She used the answer anyway. The teaser ended with Sadie saying the family would soon gather for an honest final conversation. There had been no agreement to gather. There was no final conversation. Yet the comments filled with excitement. That last comment stayed with me because it was the cleanest version of Sadie's belief. She did not think she had stolen from me. She thought family membership gave her access. My childhood, my sentences, and my silence were resources inside a shared account. The next morning, Henry asked me into his office. A parent had emailed the college after recognizing me. The parent wanted to know whether the counselor in the podcast was the same person advising her daughter. There was no accusation, but the question carried a judgment I could not control. Henry said my job was not in danger. He also suggested I work from home for several days while communications prepared a response. He framed it as protection. I heard removal. I went back to my office and closed the door. The journal had once held everything I could not say. Now its contents were pushing me out of a room I had earned. That was the first practical consequence Sadie could not dismiss as hurt feelings. I called her. This time she answered immediately. I told her a parent had contacted my employer. I expected surprise. Instead, she said, that might actually help people understand the stakes. I asked whether she heard herself. She said the show was opening a national conversation about oldest daughters. She offered to let me record a statement. I said I wanted the show stopped. Sadie's voice hardened. You cannot shut down hundreds of thousands of listeners because you are uncomfortable with being seen. I am not being seen, I said. I am being written by you. She told me the show had outgrown our personal disagreement. Sponsors had called. A major audio network wanted to discuss a partnership. People had jobs now. Contracts were being prepared. She made the theft sound like a town whose residents I would evict. I asked one question. Do they know I never consented? Sadie was silent. That silence became my next plan. Elise asked the hosting company to preserve every document Sadie had submitted about my participation. And although it would not send us internal files, it confirmed one important fact. Sadie had described me as a cooperating family source. That phrase explained why the platform had not acted faster. Sadie had used my correction email as evidence that I was involved. She had omitted the first sentence, the one that said my notes were not approval. The company had received a cropped page, just like the screenshot she posted in our family text. Elise sent the full email. She also sent my first demand for the journal, the unanswered messages, and the notice delivered before the second episode. The review changed. New episodes remained paused. The proposed network partnership was placed on hold until Sadie obtained a signed release from me. For the first time, my refusal had practical weight. Sadie did not need my forgiveness. She needed my signature. She offered me a consulting credit and a share of future revenue. The amount was not life-changing, but it revealed how serious the deal had become. I declined in one line. My private journal is not available for license. Sadie answered, everything is available for the right terms. A week later, Mom appeared at my apartment carrying the purple journal in a clear plastic bag. I saw it through the glass before I opened the door. For a second, relief erased every other feeling. I took the bag from her. The journal felt lighter than I remembered. Its ribbon was frayed. Bright tabs stuck from the top and side, each marked with a production note in Sadie's handwriting. Strong opening, mother reveal, bus station, finale quote. My private life had been indexed for pacing. I flipped through the pages. Several had pencil marks in the margins. One passage was circled. Another had a line drawn through my original ending and a note that said, "To unresolved." I stared at those two words until Mom touched my arm. She said Sadie had not meant to damage the book. I asked why she had brought it. Mom said returning it was a gesture of good faith. Then she removed a folded document from her purse. It was the release. The network had scheduled a live finale in Richmond for 6 weeks later. The venue held a little more than 400 people. Tickets had sold out after Sadie hinted that the real family would finally appear together. My name was not printed, but the description promised the voice we have been waiting to hear. I asked why the release gave the company permanent rights to every written page. Mom said contracts always sounded broader than they were. I asked why it allowed editing my words in any manner. She said the lawyers needed flexibility. Then I asked the question beneath all the others. If this is about healing, why does it need ownership? Mom sat on my couch. She looked older than she had 6 weeks earlier. She said Sadie had borrowed money to produce the first episodes. The network deal would repay it. If the deal failed, Sadie might lose her apartment and her professional reputation. I said Sadie had made those choices after I told her to stop. Mom replied, "She believed you would come around." There it was again. In my family, my future consent was treated like an asset they could spend early. I asked Mom about the tablet under the fruit bowl. She closed her eyes. She said Sadie had been afraid I would refuse to speak honestly. She admitted placing the tablet there before I arrived. "Did you know it was sinking?" I asked. Mom nodded. Then she began crying. She said Sadie only needed one clean emotional line for the finale trailer, and they planned to ask permission after I heard how beautiful it sounded. I had started recording the conversation openly when Mom sat down. My phone rested between us with the screen lit. I had told her I needed a record because private conversations no longer felt safe. She had agreed. Now the record held the truth. The hidden recording had not been an accident. It had been a planned attempt to capture my voice first and seek permission later. Mom noticed the phone again. She asked whether I would use her words against Sadie. I said, "I will use the truth to protect myself." She flinched as if those were the same thing. That night, I removed every sticky tab from the journal. I did it slowly. Each tab made a small ripping sound as the adhesive lifted from the page. Some left pale marks. I pressed the pages flat with my palm. At the bus station entry, Sadie had written finale quote beside the sentence about love and fear. I turned the page and found the line she had ignored. I had written, "Loving them did not make the house safe. It only made leaving harder." That was the truth she could not use. It ruined the healing arc she had built. It also gave me the clearest language I had found since the podcast began. Elise contacted the network's head of nonfiction audio, Ruth Bell. Ruth agreed to a private video call. She was direct. She said the network had been told I supported the show, but was hesitant about publicity. She had not been told I demanded the journal back before release. Ruth apologized for relying on incomplete materials. She said the live finale could not proceed as advertised without my release. I asked whether it would be canceled. She said Sadie had proposed a version using an actress and selected family statements. I understood immediately. Sadie planned to stage my absence as part of the story. If I stayed home, she would narrate my silence. If I protested online, she would call it unresolved pain. She had built a format where every response became content. I told Ruth I was considering attending. Elise looked at me sharply on the screen. Ruth said I was not obligated to appear. I said, "I know, that is why appearing has to be my choice." Elise prepared a short written notice for the network and venue. The action would still be mine. The notice only made the boundary harder to edit. I spent the next month preparing less than Sadie expected. I did not write a speech about every injury. I did not build a slideshow. I selected 3 things: the purple journal, the full correction email, and Mom's recorded admission about the hidden tablet. Devin helped me listen to the audio. We cut nothing. The useful section lasted less than a minute. Mom's words were plain. Sadie needed one clean emotional line. They would ask permission after. No music was required. I also practiced one sentence for the audience. Not a clever sentence, a clear one. I did not participate in this podcast, and I asked Sadie to stop before the first episode was released. Every time I said it, my voice shook less. Sadie kept promoting the finale. She posted photographs of the Alder Street house and the purple graphics made from my sentence. She promised reconciliation, truth, and a surprise guest. Listeners traveled from several states. 3 days before the event, she sent me a backstage pass. Under it, she wrote, "I know you will do the right thing when you see how many people this has helped." I replied, "I will do the right thing." I did not tell her we meant different things. Ruth met me at a side entrance. Elise came with me, but she stopped outside the dressing room. We had agreed that the confrontation belonged to me. Ruth would witness the rights issue. Elise would step in only if someone tried to force a contract or remove the journal. Behind the stage, I could hear the audience through the walls. They clapped when the theme music played. My own sentence was printed on a banner above the lobby bar. Sadie entered the dressing room carrying a folder. She looked relieved when she saw me. Then she saw the purple journal in my hands, and relief became calculation. She hugged me before I could step back. "I knew you would come," she whispered. "I came," I said. "That is all you know." She placed the release on the makeup table. The first paragraph gave her permanent rights to my private journals. The second said I had approved every episode. We were back at the moment where this story began. Sadie uncapped a pen and turned the release toward me. "We go on in 8 minutes," she said. "Ruth needs this before the live stream starts." Ruth stood near the door. She did not correct her. She simply watched. I read the first page again, though I already knew every clause. The release said my participation was voluntary. It said I confirmed that the podcast represented my experience fairly. It gave Sadie the right to edit, dramatize, translate, advertise, and reuse my words forever. I placed the pen beside the paper. "I am not signing this." Sadie's smile held for a second too long. "You came all this way." "I came to correct the record." "The record is the show, Maya." "No, the show is what you made from the record." She looked at Ruth. "Can we have a private minute?" Ruth said she would stay because the release affected the network. Sadie's jaw tightened. She preferred family conversations when she controlled the room and the recording. Mom entered through the second door. She wore a pale green dress and the pearl earrings she saved for church. Sadie had brought her as part of the finale. Mom saw the unsigned paper and stopped. "Maya," she said, "please do not do this in anger." I held up the journal. "I have been saying no for months." Sadie stepped closer. "You corrected the scripts. You came to the house. You are here now. You cannot keep acting like you had nothing to do with this." I opened the folder I had brought and placed the full email beside her release. My first line was visible at the top. "These notes are not approval, and I do not consent to release." "You cropped that line when you sent my email to the platform," I said. Sadie glanced at Ruth. The page break was awkward. It was the first sentence. She said the corrections still improved the episode. I agreed. "I was trying to reduce the damage. You turned that into collaboration." Sadie's face flushed. "Stop calling it theft." "You wrote about us. Mom's breakdowns were not yours. Dad leaving was not yours. My childhood was not yours." "The events were shared," I said. "The sentences were mine. The journal was mine. And my choice not to publish either one was mine." The stage manager knocked and called a 5-minute warning. The audience cheered again. Sadie looked toward the sound. Her fear became visible at last. It was not fear that she had hurt me. It was fear that the room might stop loving her. She lowered her voice. "There are 400 people out there. Crew members, sponsors, a network team. Do you understand what happens if you embarrass me tonight?" I did understand. That was why the pressure had worked for so long. Sadie created a cost, then asked me to prevent it. She borrowed money after my refusal. She sold tickets without my agreement. She promised a finale she did not own. Now every consequence stood behind the wall and chanted her name. "You made those promises," I said. "I did not." Mom whispered, "She is your sister." Sadie reached for the journal. I pulled it back. Her hand remained in the air between us. "This book contains our family," she said. "It contains me trying to survive our family." She shook her head. "That is exactly the kind of line people connect with. You have no idea how much good this show has done." "Help built without consent is not yours to give," I said. Ruth asked Sadie whether she had any signed permission predating the first episode. Sadie said the family had discussed the project together. Ruth repeated the question. Sadie did not answer. I took out my phone. "There is one more thing you should hear." Mom looked at the screen and understood. "Maya, I was upset that day. I told you I was recording. You agreed." Sadie said the backstage room was not the place. I pressed play. Mom's recorded voice filled the small space. She said Sadie only needed one clean emotional line for the finale trailer. She admitted placing the tablet under the fruit bowl. She said they planned to ask permission after I heard how beautiful it sounded. The clip ended. No one spoke. Outside, the host music swelled. The stage manager knocked again. 2 minutes. Ruth turned to Sadie. "You told us the kitchen recording was accidental." Sadie said Mom was confused. Mom stared at her. "I am not confused." It was the first time she had contradicted Sadie without first asking me to soften the truth. The moment did not repair anything, but it changed the room. Sadie pointed at my phone. "She set you up." Mom answered quietly. "No, you did." Sadie's eyes filled with tears. She asked how we could both abandon her when the project was finally succeeding. Mom reached for her, then stopped. I saw the old system waiting for me. Sadie in crisis. Mom frightened. Maya steady. Maya useful. Maya responsible for the landing. I did not step into it. Ruth said the network could not proceed with the partnership, and the live stream could not include material from my journal or imply my consent. Sadie stared at her as if the decision were a betrayal instead of a result. The stage manager opened the door. "We are live in 60 seconds. What am I telling the house?" Ruth said. "Tell them there is a delay." Sadie grabbed her headset. "No, I can explain." She walked toward the stage before anyone could stop her. Mom followed. Ruth looked at me. "You do not have to go out there," she said. "I know." That was why I went. Sadie reached the microphone while the theme music was still fading. The theater lights turned her into the version of herself she trusted most. She smiled at the audience and thanked them for believing in the power of family stories. Then she said there had been a last-minute disagreement about how to tell the ending. A disappointed murmur moved through the room. Sadie lifted one hand. "My sister Maya is here tonight," she said. "She has carried this story longer than any of us. I hope she will come out and help me tell the truth." It was a gamble. She believed the audience would pull me into her script. She believed I would protect her from the discomfort she had created. I walked onto the stage with the purple journal against my chest. The applause began before I reached the second microphone. Some people stood. They thought they were seeing reconciliation. I waited until the room settled. "My name is Maya Carter," I said. "I did not participate in this podcast, and I asked Sadie to stop before the first episode was released." The silence changed. It was no longer expectant. It was attentive. Sadie stepped toward me. "Maya, we agreed this would be a conversation." We did not. She reached for my microphone, then seemed to remember the live stream. I kept speaking. "This journal was taken from a locked chest. Exact passages were performed by an actress." My objections were cropped to look like cooperation. A private meeting was secretly recorded after I was promised there would be no recording. Sadie said, "That is one interpretation." I opened the journal to the bus station entry. Colored adhesive marks still shadowed the page. "This is not an interpretation. This is the book." I told the audience Sadie had used one part of the entry to say I stayed home because love was stronger than fear. Then I read the next line, the one the podcast left out. "Loving them did not make the house safe. It only made leaving harder." A woman in the front row lowered her phone. Somewhere near the back, a chair creaked. No music rose beneath my words. They belonged to me again because I had chosen to speak them. Sadie turned away from the audience. Her voice was low, but the microphones caught it. "You are destroying years of my work." I looked at her. "You did not heal my story. You sold the pages I wrote to survive you." Her face went still. I handed Ruth the written notice. It stated that I did not consent to any use of the journal and requested removal of the disputed episodes. Ruth accepted it in full view of the audience. Then I picked up the release from the small table beside Sadie. I did not tear it. I did not throw it. I wrote 4 words across the signature line. "I do not consent." I placed the paper under her hand. Ruth signaled to the production booth. The sponsor logos vanished from the screen behind us. The livestream indicator changed from red to dark. The theme image of the Alder Street staircase disappeared. Sadie looked at the blank screen. For the first time since the podcast began, she had no edit ready. A few people applauded. Others sat quietly. Some looked angry, though I could not tell at whom. I did not need the whole room to agree. Consent is not a vote. Mom came to the edge of the stage. She did not ask me to stay. She only said, "I am sorry I opened the chest." It was not a complete apology. It was the first accurate one. I nodded once. Then I walked out with the journal in my own hands. The network withdrew its offer the next morning. By the end of the week, the hosting company had removed the 2 episodes that used my writing. Ticket holders received refunds. The crew was paid from the event insurance and the remaining sponsor deposit, not from me. Sadie posted a correction. It was careful and legal, but it said the essential thing: I had not approved the use of my journal. She removed the purple quote graphics and stopped calling me a participant. She did not apologize to me directly. For several weeks, strangers argued online about whether private writing could belong to a family. Some defended Sadie. Others said the show had helped them understand their own childhoods. I believed them. Something can help one person and still harm the person it was taken from. The college did not issue a public statement. Henry welcomed me back to my office and asked what support I needed. I said my students had to be treated as students, not as an audience. He understood. The parent who had emailed never contacted us again. Mom mailed me the spare brass key. It arrived in a plain envelope with one sentence. I should have protected what you trusted me to hold. I did not answer immediately. An apology could be accurate without restoring access. We speak now, but not often. Mom is no longer allowed to store my belongings or carry messages between Sadie and me. When she starts explaining Sadie's pressure, I end the call. That boundary has made our conversations shorter and more honest. Sadie and I have not repaired our relationship. 6 months after the finale, she sent an email with no offer, contract, or request. She wrote that she had confused understanding someone with having the right to explain them. I saved the message. I did not treat it as a finished apology. The purple journal sits on a shelf in my home now. It is not hidden in a cedar chest. The sticky notes are gone, though faint marks remain where Sadie placed them. I used to hate those marks. Now they remind me that damage can remain visible without remaining in control. There were 3 blank pages at the back. One Sunday morning, I opened to the first one and wrote a new entry. I did not summarize the podcast or describe the audience. I wrote, "Today I told the truth without giving away the whole story." Then I closed the journal. That is the difference my family refused to understand. A shared past does not create shared ownership of every private word. Love does not cancel consent, and silence is not permission waiting to be edited. If this story made you think of a boundary someone keeps calling selfish, ask yourself who benefits when you stop defending it. Sometimes the most honest family story is the one you finally choose not to surrender.